Hey, welcome to PopCast. My name is Dr. Popular. PopCast is a crowd-sponsored yo-yo show. Huge shout out to John Anderson, Taka from Spin Gear, and the 70 other sponsors I have over on patreon.com/docpop. That's a new record for me. We're doing virtual yo-yo clubs, and we're even talking about designing our first yo-yo. So this is going to be kind of relevant to the discussion I'm going to have today with Jeffrey Peng, who is the founder of Luftverk and designer of many famous yo-yos, including one of my favorite plastic yo-yos of all time, the skeeva, the skeeva. How do you pronounce that?
I pronounce it as skeeva, but I've heard skeeva. There's a funny story behind that.
Well, I
But
mean, that's your yo-yo, right? You get to call it whatever you want.
yeah, no, it's funny because I was living in the Czech Republic, like quick story, but living in the Czech Republic, trying to find a name for this. I was looking up names and the word skeeva popped up, and it's actually like I guess equivalent to like a Shakespearean word for the Czech language, like an older language for the word bread. And they pronounce it skiva. It's actually pronounced skiva,
Yeah,
but skiva, it's actually a Czech word. It's kind of funny,
cool.
but I say skiva. So
Well, yeah, you're Jeffrey Peng, the famous owner and creator of Luftverk yo-yos. What do you do when you're not designing yo-yos? What is your kind of the rest of your life like?
um, mostly right now, I've been working on cars a lot. Like I'm a huge car nut, so definitely doing a lot of that. Last year when I was living in Vancouver, I was actually like a web developer, so I was kind of juggling that as well as all the yo-yo stuff on the side. And yeah, so with COVID and stuff, I decided to move home and just kind of focus, like double down on like all the left work stuff and yo-yos and just like designing. Like that's a huge thing that I do a lot, like just for clients. So whether it's yo-yo related or just other CAD stuff like car parts or whatever. Um, yeah, that's pretty much like because of COVID, I think two things kind of happened. Like all the like my personal like businesses, they kind of grew a lot more than what I was used to. So the runs of yo-yos are getting bigger, and moving home, obviously, I have less like less expenses with it was supposed to be a temporary thing, but the longer because I thought COVID probably not gonna be around too long, but
Hmm.
the more it lingered, everyone just yeah, I decided to stay here, spend more time with my family. So yeah, that's kind of like my day to day. Either designing yo-yos for myself or for clients. Um, yeah, that's kind of like the day to day right now. Sounds kind of boring, but
Designing yo-yos, that sounds pretty exciting. And you mentioned an interest in cars. You post several videos of yourself drifting and racing.
yeah.
Are you a racer? Is that like kind of your main interest in cars?
It's more, I guess racing and drifting are kind of like very different things. Like I think drift racing is more like a 50-meter sprint. Whoever gets there is kind of wins, and like drifting is more like figure skating, where it's kind of an art, right? Like there's no real like winner or loser. I would say like people try to make it into a competitive sport. Like I have a good friend of mine, he competes, but it's a very weird thing, right? Like but yeah, I got to hear like back in Vancouver, uh, there was like this huge scene of like drifting, like that was like a huge thing there. But once I moved back to Ontario, like I found locals doing it and like just a really like wholesome, uh, I guess skill oriented. Like I think before I was introduced to it, it was more like a cool thing people would do, like oh wow, like look at him like slide that corner. But like when I found started looking like researching more into it, it's actually a very technical thing, like how you set up your car, the parts that are in your car, suspension geometry, and obviously like driver skill, and just always trying to like push that limit. So I find that very like satisfying. Anything that has to do with like skill progression, I get pretty like obsessive over. I think like most yo-yoers are kind of like that, right? Like they kind of chase that. It's like, oh, I want to learn this like next trick or like make up the next trick that, and it just kind of pushes you. And like I think from that, maybe from the outside, it doesn't look like drifting is like that, but it's very much like that, where you can really push yourself and keep improving. So yeah. Very fun. I love taking after because they always freak out. So
How did you first get into yo-yoing?
yo-yoing, that oh man, that was a long, long time ago. It was must have been 2005, 2006 is when I first started. I think in 2000, what happened is like the summer of like 2004 ish, like my cousin sent me a Japan Nationals. Actually, I should actually. Oh man, okay. Rewind like one more year. There was a guy with that came to our school. It was our grade
Mhm.
school. So I was in like I think I was in the eighth grade or seventh grade, and he came in like Russell's, and his it was Fast Eddie. I don't know if you actually know him,
Yo,
but
Fast Eddie himself came to your school?
it was okay. Here's the interesting thing. It was like I don't know who these people were because I can't find them and they're not in the community anymore. But Fast Eddie, like it was a Fast Eddie branded yo-yo, but like there
Uh-huh.
was like another guy that came in. I guess they were like working. I think there was like three or
Okay.
four of them that like worked together. So Fast Eddie
Mhm.
didn't actually come to our
Okay.
school, but I guess like he helped Fast Eddie, and I guess he was like his friend, or they were working on this business together. And like
Mhm.
I was so young, I didn't really know anything about yo-yos, right? Like my dad got me yo-yo when I was like really young, like 6 years old, and he used to play with yo-yos back in Hong Kong, like during the booms and stuff, right? So he told me about like the Coca-Cola yo-yos that everyone talks about. But anyway, so once I saw this again, I was like, oh, cool! Like there's a dude like doing
Mhm.
shoot the moon, and like all the kind of like basically looper tricks, right? Yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. I remember buying a Fast 201 at Walmart,
Yeah.
the one with like the crazy loud starburst,
Mhm.
which is hilarious. And then after that, I was like, okay, like I started playing around with it more, and then um, I think like really soon after, or I can't remember if I bought that first or if I did an online order, but my online order was it was a Kickside and
From Yo-Yo
what
Jam.
was it? Spin Factor HG. And yeah, those were my two. I remember like the yo-yo jams. Yeah,
Yeah.
so those were my first two like real yo-yos. I would say those two, and then like the Fast 201. I can't really remember which one I got first, but I distinctively remember using the Kickside a lot,
Yeah,
and
that's a
I
dope
loved
yo-yo.
it. It's so
Yeah.
good, and obviously the bolts. I love that too, which is based off the Kickside. But yeah, I
Yeah.
digress. That's kind of like the story of how I got into it. Yeah, funny story too, because my mom always said like, because she when I told her how much it cost to buy a Kickside, it was $20, and the spin factory was 35. She freaked out. She was like, "No way, you're spending that much on yo-yos. You're gonna get bored of it in a year, like all this stuff." And I kind of like laugh at her
Yeah.
now.
So how did you go from the kick side to designing and manufacturing titanium yo-yos? Like
Yeah,
what's that process?
yeah,
That what happened between those two steps?
yeah. That could go. It's a pretty long story, but yeah, it's a good one. It's because I remember when I was yeah, like the yo-yos back then, they were pretty good, but they definitely weren't as good as they were now. Like I remember the first thing. I remember one of the things with the kicks I didn't like, which I loved about the Bolt, was that it was a hybrid response. So
Hmm.
one side was a starburst, which is like a plastic, the plastic, it's like pretty much just plastic teeth, and the other side is the O-ring, right? And it worked great, but like it would sometimes slip, like the string would slip, and then the other thing that it would just make this like incredibly loud noise.
Yeah.
And like yeah, it's funny because like now when I hear a Starburst yo-yo, it's like so nostalgic. It reminds me of my childhood. It's
Hmm.
like whoa, that's crazy. Like I have a Renegade, and it's like whoa, this is great, right? But um, yeah, so what people would do back in the day, like people on the forums would like shave off the starburst and cut another O-ring groove. And everyone would like I think the Lin Fury was the one that had the double O-ring groove, and everyone loved that yo for it.
Hmm.
Um, so I think as a kid too, I was a little bit more on like I guess like I was always interested in like technical stuff. Like I had like remote control cars I would like take apart, or like remote control. I think I had like a remote control helicopter, and I always tinkered with that stuff. And when it came to a yo-yo, I always like was interested or fascinated with like how it worked or how to improve how it worked, I guess. And I think because the yo-yos back then weren't that great, like they were good, but they still weren't like what they are today. I started to kind of like modify and like, you know, change things up with the yo-yos. Like for example, like I would give it a satin finish, like by sanding it on a drill. You know, like I was a kid, right? So I was just like playing around with it. That was a common thing people would do. They would like do a satin finish so that, yeah, exactly
So
that.
you could see the original shiny, sticky, and then I just put it on a drill and just held sandpaper next to it.
So
When I was selling these modified bolts, I would just walk around with sandpaper just kind of throughout the day and just like sand yo-yos because I had like 30, you know, a week to do or whatever.
yeah, and that was a very popular. I learned that like I was on the Yo, which I don't even think is around anymore. It's really sad because I had so many memories and like messages on there and stuff when I was a kid, right? So that was like kind of the first easy thing to do, right? As a kid, you're just like, oh, what can I do to improve this? Oh, wow, people are doing grind tricks, so it's not so sticky when it like touches your hand. So you would like sand it and then you would mod your yo. I think that was like one of my first like mods. And then, you know, I think I quickly got other yo-yos like the freehand zeros, which were tons of people were doing mods with. So, you know, I was learning tricks, but I think what I really enjoyed was like how a yo-yo worked technically. And it's funny because I don't really think I was ever the best yo-yoer too. Like that might have had something to do with it. So I kind of gravitated more to like the technical side of it, right? Like trying to widen the gap, stuff like that. And then, so for the first couple of years, I would go on the forums and I'd be really active. There was like a section for like yo-yo mods.
Yeah.
And there was like a couple people that's like Kyle Weems. He was huge into modding. I remember, I think Skip, he was the Australian yo-yoer. He was also into like modifying yo-yos and stuff like that. It's like there's so many other people, but like this was so long ago that it's like slipping my mind. So anyway, so I started to mod a lot more. Like I started adding rings to yo-yos to see how it would change like the weight distribution. I would cut out like the hub of a yo-yo and like mash it with like a freehand zero. So it would have like an aluminum hub with like and I would put rings on that. Like I was doing like all sorts of stuff, especially after my parents, like I think for my 16th birthday. So this would have been like 2 years or 3 years into yo-yoing. I wanted a lathe, like a mini lathe, and you know they ended up getting that for my birthday, and I still have that lathe, and I look at that thing, I'm like, wow, like I really do think I wouldn't be doing like the Luftverk yo-yo stuff, like designing stuff without that lathe, because back then I would just spend hours on that thing. Like I would pull all-nighters to try to just machine yo-yos. I was just so like I don't know, like obsessed with it back then. Yeah, I just loved it. So started doing that a lot more, and then while still, you know, learning tricks, making videos and stuff. And then I think when I was like 17, 18-ish, I kind of stopped yo-yoing, like the yo stuff. A lot of it I kind of just put on the back burner kind of thing, mostly because I got into cars. Because, you know, you get your license and now you're like, wow, I want to build cars and stuff, right? Like that was my mentality. And, you know, I didn't have that much money back then, so I was working like 2 jobs. I was like super busy. And then, yeah, it kind of got put on the back burner. And I think one year, Eric Kolosky hit me up, and he was like, hey, like, how you been? Blah, blah, blah. I just caught up. And he was like, hey, do you want to come check out the yo-yo contest down? It was the MA States contest. And I was like, well, like, I don't really like yo-yo that much anymore. Like, I was kind of more into the car stuff, but like, I'd love to see you and like, and you know, Andre and all, right? Because I haven't seen those in years, right? And they were good friends of mine. So I was like, sure, yeah, I'll drive down. It was like, I can't remember how long the drive is down there, but it's from Toronto. It's like 8 hours, something like that, 10 hours. So drove down there and I, hung out with a bunch of people and and I think I filmed a video of that year too, like a contest, like a recap style video. I think it's on YouTube. But yeah, like that kind of started to spark like a level of like interest in it again. And just remembering maybe less so about like, learning tricks and stuff, but more about like the community aspect of it, right? Like the people that were behind it are just awesome, right? So there was a company in Toronto run by Manny, and it was Northern Spin Company,
Mm-hmm.
and this was a kind of way back. So one of my good friends, Adam, he went to OCAD, and Manny also went to OCAD as well, and my sister also went to that same school. So it was just like a very tight knit thing or whatever. And he was doing like aluminum stuff, titanium stuff, like, but it was a little bit more like high end, right? And we ended up, he had some like old halves of an aluminum yo-yo, and I ended up like helping him finish those and figure something out with that. And there was someone else on board that was more like his friend, and I think they were kind of doing their own thing, and I was kind of just like I felt like I was almost like a sponsored player for a bit,
Mm-hmm.
but it was very clear that they didn't really have I guess like the energy or the drive to like really. It was a very much a side thing for them, right? And I think at that age I was pretty gung ho about it, and they had a lot of guys like just sitting around. Like I think those illuminators were sitting around for like a year, and so we released that, and then nothing became of it. Nothing became like afterward. Nothing really came of it, and I just decided to do my own thing. His other business partner like moved down to San Francisco and started a job there. So I really wanted to design kind of like and I was keep in mind I was in engineering at this time, so that was another thing too. Is that's where I kind of started doing more CAD stuff, which is design in general. So one of my first thoughts was like, oh wow, how cool would it be to design like just a one run like titanium yo-yo that was kind of like a signature yo-yo for me,
Mm-hmm.
because there wasn't that many first off, and then I always just wanted like to be like, you know what, I'm just gonna design one yo-yo and like it will be my yo-yo, like the one that describes me the best, and then that'll be it. So try to do prototypes, prototype after prototype. It just like didn't work out. So this is when I tried using Canadian manufacturers. So I went through three shops, I think. Two of them were like they machined crazy stuff. Like
Yeah.
one was doing like helicopter parts, part for like OPG, like we have like a power plant nearby, like a generator plant. They did tons of parts for them, and then I was so confident. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'll send you this. And they were super confident too. They were like, yep, we can do this, no problem. Blah blah blah, super gung ho about it, right? Spend a bunch of money on the prototyping stuff, and like they they'd be like, hey, it's done, and then I would play with it and it would vibe like crazy, and I was like,
Yeah.
well, no, it's not like to tolerance. And then they were
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, what do you mean? It was the same as the drawing, blah blah blah, all this stuff, and it was just a headache, and it was the shop after shop, and it was horrible, right? Like it was just bad for everyone. Like the shop wasn't having a good time because they were wasting so much material, and I wasn't having a good time because I was spending so much money on these prototypes. While I was in engineering, I remember I had pretty like toxic relationship at the time. Like it was just a bad. Like I think
Yeah.
I felt very like depressed and just very like overwhelmed by everything. And I think the final like straw was when I failed one of my classes, and I was just like really devastated. And yeah, it was definitely a very low point in my life. Like vividly remember that was a very bad point in my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just decided. I was like, you know what, like I think one of the last shop I tried was like we can't. They just said like, yeah, like, we've been trying to do this for like a month, and like this is just not a product or a project that we want to pursue. And that was kind of just like super sad to me because I was like, you know what, this was supposed to be a fun thing, right? Like this was supposed to be just like I was just wanted one yo-yo and maybe like 10 or 15 euros to sell or whatever. So, yeah, I just decided to like call it. Like I wasn't gonna pursue that, and I
Yeah,
decided
that
to take a
makes
year off.
sense.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Like what else? Like I'm done with that. I was like, you know what, this is not really possible. So then I went. I just, you know, so I took a year off school, and then I just decided to backpack through Europe. I just wanted to like kind of like run away from myself. It was a very like emotional time, I think, looking back at it. Like, um, uh, you know, I probably should have like gotten a therapist or something. Like, I think I was just so in my head so much that I was like, you know what, I just need to run away. So, you know, I ended up doing a huge like backpack trip for, it was like 7 months with like barely any money. I was, oh, and I also missed a part because like one little segment is that I was 3D in university. I got a 3D printer, and
Mhm.
that was like huge. Like, because back then it wasn't like really that big.
Yeah, like
This was
2015
this
or
was
something.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got a 3D printer, and they were really expensive. So I got like the
Hmm.
cheapest one, this wood one. It was a Prusa i3, and it was still like $800. And I just printed yo-yos, and that's how I funded the titanium stuff. But then I spent all that money, and then I only had a little bit left over. Um, so I just like left and went to Europe, and I was like sleeping on streets and you know, eating bread and pasta every day, and meeting other people that were also doing that at hostels, or like stay there $10 a night and just like, you know, kind of like party and go see the city, and then, you know, just reflect on stuff. And it was quite interesting when I remember I went to Germany, because I would just go on Skyscanner and be the cheapest flight, and then I would just go. So I remember I took a flight to Germany, and I realized there was like a toy convention that they have every year in Germany, where they also host. I want to say it's the German nationals, I think. Yeah,
But a poi
I'm pretty
contest?
sure. It's sorry, it's a yo-yo contest held within a toy convention.
Okay,
It's like
okay,
they
yes.
call it the hobby spiel. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is all from memory, so it's like I could be wrong. But um, yeah, they would host it on the stage in the middle, and then the rest there would be all sorts of really crazy, cool toys and games, board games, all this stuff. And then like the yo-yoers would have a booth. I think it was Yo-Yo Factory that had a booth, so they would
Mhm.
also run the contest there, right? And that's where I met like Vashak and all the guys from Prague, like all the Slushny guys and stuff like that, right? And they were like, "Hey, just come to Prague. Like, we'd love to hang out, love to have you there, right?" So I remember I went there, and I like fell in love with the city. I fell in love with like just the atmosphere and how different it was, and like, and I went to a couple contests, and it was just like so different. Like yo-yoing in Prague is like, it's closer to like a rap battle or like a skateboard like event or something. Like it's very like hip, I guess. Versus maybe in North America it's a little bit like perceived as like a nerdy toy, I guess. But like over there, it was like they would have contests in like bars, and there would be like music. It
Mhm.
was like just like a cool environment. Um, so that really like inspired me. I was like, wow, that's really freaking cool. And then I remember I left there, went uh, ended up going to a couple other countries, and then I came home. But I think I was before I came home, I was spending time in Sweden, and that's where I started to like start designing yo-yos again. And I don't know why. I think because I didn't have a manufacturer lined up. I didn't
Yeah.
know any manufacturers at all. And yeah, like I didn't know like why, but I pulled up my old designs and just started playing around with them on the laptop. Um, just kind of thinking like, wow, this would be, you know what, this is something I really do want to do. So then I ended up going home. I got like a part-time job at a Honda dealership, just, you know, like moving cars around and stuff like that. And I started. I remember. I remember I did. Like I spent a few months here. Then I went to. I remember I went to California, and there was a national yo-yo contest. I think it was nationals, and that's where I met. I remember I was staying with a couple people, like just random yo-yoers and stuff, right? And just like hanging out. And I think it must have been Tyler Severance. Ended up staying with him,
Hmm.
I think in Arizona, or it might have been someone else. It might have been Aaron Bennett's house. But anyway, Tyler was there. And why the 3D printer was so important that I mentioned earlier, because I actually had a 3D printed yo-yo. Um, and when I flew home, I actually left that yo-yo on like his couch. And I didn't know. And he messaged me one day. He's like, "Hey, did you leave a yo-yo here below?" I was like, "Oh, shoot. Like, that's a yo-yo I printed. Like, yeah, if you could just send it back to me, just if I can get it back somehow, just let me know." And then he was like, at that time, he said, "Hey, I'm actually like trying to start a yo-yo company." And this is back when he was still sponsored with Yoyo Factory.
Hmm.
And he wanted to do like school shows and stuff like that. He just had a different direction he wanted to go. And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And he saw this yo-yo. He's like, "Yeah, you designed this?" I was like, "Yeah." And then he's like, "Well, I want someone to design yo-yos. I've never designed yo-yos before, so is it possible to design a couple yo-yos?" So I ended up designing a couple yo-yos for him, like with the first base and like a couple other like the starting yo-yos that he kind of started Recess with. And
You designed the first base.
yeah,
That's cool. I
actually,
didn't
yeah.
know that.
So it was collaboration with him, right? Like he had a lot of input on like he wanted like logo, an area for logo, stuff like that, right? And but yeah, so I designed. I remember I think I designed like the weekend or something like that. I think that's what it was called back then. But he had a lot. Obviously, it was like a collaborative effort, as with all the designs I do, even for clients now. Like it's a very collaborative effort, I'd say.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, that's kind of how I started to think about. I was like, because I never thought about manufacturing in China. I was not that it was like bad or anything. It was just because I didn't know who I would go to
Hmm.
or what I would do or what, right? Like I would like I didn't know at all. Here in Canada, I could just walk to a shop or like go drive to a shop and ask them, be like, "Hey, can you make this for me?" So suddenly I was, working with a couple like shops and stuff, and I was a lot more involved in it. I was like 3, 4 shops, and it completely slipped my mind. Like I didn't even think about titanium yo stuff. Like it was just on back burner. I was just like doing my stuff. And I was just excited that wow, I'm like designing yo-yos are being made. Um, and then and then that's when I was like, whoa, wait. Like I messaged a couple of the shops and I was like, "Hey, do you guys make titanium yo-yos by any chance?" And a lot of them were like, "Yeah, we tried." Like there weren't that many people back then that made titanium yo-yos.
Yeah.
So and funny enough, their prices were twice as expensive as any of the Canadian shops. It was ridiculous. That's what scared me
Yeah.
away. I
Yeah.
was
You
like,
would think that in China the factory would
you would
be
think it was
cheaper or
cheaper,
something.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly, right.
It's probably a good sign that they're more expensive. They know what they're
Yeah,
doing.
but exactly, and like it was interesting because at the time I didn't know, right? Like I didn't because I just thought they were just machine shops, whatever. But a lot of some are just like random machine shops, and they also do yo-yos on the side. Some of them are much more like yo-yo specific,
Hmm.
and and obviously have more knowledge and stuff, right? But I think back then, I was like, okay, I didn't have anything against made in China stuff, but I knew that if I were to make something in China, it would be perceived as lower quality or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Even though we now know like that's not true. It's completely subjective. So, and with the price increase, like I was like, okay, that doesn't make sense. I'm paying more for something that's like twice as much, and then people are going to perceive it as maybe like a lower quality thing. It kind of like from a business standpoint back then, because I wanted to do like a run of 20 of them. I was like, at least I'll break even and I'll get stuck with a couple of them, and that's not a problem because I would love that yo-yo because I designed it. Um, but yeah, so I remember scrounging up all the money I had from working at Honda and putting it into my project, right? And I was like living at home. I was living here at the time, so I just spent it all on that, and I was just like, you know what, I'll just try it, and that's how I made the first Evora. So that's kind of the story of how that happened, and that yo-yo sold out instantly because I guess another interesting story. There was like I think that what was it? The Yo-Yo factory was making a yo-yo and a titanium yo-yo, and so was One Drop. So One Drop made the Citizen, and Yo-Yo factory made what's that? What's the organic one called? Do you know? Oh
Well,
man,
the only one I know of
Ricochet.
theirs is the Confusion.
It's
That's
Ricochet.
a
It was a
Ricochet.
really, I think that was the one they released, and it was interesting because I actually before Tyler found my yo-yo, I was doing a little backpack trip on my way to Cali, and I stopped by Oregon,
Mhm.
and I talked to Sean at One Drop, and I said, "Hey, can you make a titanium yo-yo? Like, please, I need someone to machine, blah blah blah." And that was my first time meeting him, and I think he was kind of like, it's just so much work to
Yeah.
machine a titanium yo-yo that he said that if he was going to do one, he would do it himself, like for One Drop, which is totally valid, right? Like you'd want that kind of effort to be like the fruits of your labor kind of thing. But yeah, so it was interesting because like they ended up releasing one, and then Yoyo Factory released one, and then that like lit a fire under my butt. I'm like, I can't have this. There's two other people. We kind of just had like a friendly kind of warfare kind of thing. But
Were those
it
like the
was
two first titanium yo-yos?
no,
Okay,
there
there's
were
more.
other ones a long
Okay.
time ago, but again, they were few and far between.
Yeah.
Because to make a titanium yo-yo is like something, it's like 6 times as expensive as an aluminum one. It's ridiculous. So it's a lot more expensive, and the profit margins are way slimmer. So for a business standpoint, it really doesn't make sense to make titanium, especially if you're wholesaling it to a retail store.
Yeah.
So back then, that was kind of the main thing people did. And the ways I found around that was like doing a direct sale, right? And obviously that
Yeah.
um, kind of you don't reach as many people, but like I kind of grew the company like a little bit more organically, and people are more willing to buy directly from me, and I've always appreciated that because I can now offer, for example, I can pay for more runs, or I can offer better customer service. Someone has a problem, I'll just send them a new one kind of thing, instead of
Mhm.
having to penny pinch if the profit margins are like so slim that you're barely breaking even, that it's like I'm pretty lenient on that kind of stuff. But anyway, it was a funny story with that. Because there's like
Yeah.
those two yo-yos, people were reviewing all three at the same time,
Yeah.
kind of comparing them. So I think people liked the Evora, so I was happy with that. But that's how it started. That's kind of like the whole thing. Now we're
How
here.
how much did your first yo-yo cost? Like, what was the retail on it?
It was 280, and then I think it was 280, and then 350 for the AMS 2048, like that hard coat finish. So I offered it in anodized titanium, which no one else I don't no one else really did anodized titaniums back then.
Mhm.
There's only like maybe one or two that did, but everyone else did it like kind of raw. So I had like the purple Evora, and then I had the AMS like that hard coat. So it was like I want to say it was 280 and 350, and I remember thinking I shouldn't have charged that cheap, but I was afraid people would buy it.
Yeah.
It was my first yo-yo, and I was a nobody. Like people knew me from making yo-yo videos and stuff, and modding and stuff. So
So you
um,
didn't even make that much money on them. You made your money back, but
I
not
made my
enough to
money
like
back. Yeah,
reinvest.
I definitely made no, like I made my money back, and like that's when I realized I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like people are willing to directly buy from me.
Mhm.
Like that's the killer with titanium, right? Um, if a yo-yo costs $150 to make, with packaging and everything, and then let's say the retail is $300, and then most retailers want on average like 50%. So if let's say you see a yo-yo that's $20, they usually want $10. They want it wholesale price $10, so they have that profit, but like cushion, I guess. Um, and if you calculate that with titanium yo-yo, it literally doesn't make sense. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, so you want this yo-yo to be wholesale to you at $150, and it almost cost me that much to make it. Like, I guess if it was really like a passion project, then yeah, like that would be totally okay, right? And I really do think that was the number one reason why no one made titanium yo-yos, like none of the big brands.
Yeah.
Because there's money in it. Like there's no, you can't, and it's not like even a selfish thing, like, oh, I want to make a lot of money, but it's more like it's not sustainable. Like, how do you pay for the next run if this one doesn't, or if this one doesn't sell well, you're stuck with a bunch of yo-yos, and then you're left with a deficit kind of thing, right? Like, yeah, you want to kind of carry on the torch with the next one, right? So that's the reason why I did price it pretty like aggressively, but it was because I built my own website and stuff, and then directly sold it. So yeah.
How did you end up with the name Luftverk?
So that was an interesting story. I had a friend in Sweden at the time. So a lot of people think they're like, oh, why are you using a V? It should be a W because it's German, whatever, right? It's actually a Swedish word, and it was like one of my Swedish friends. Like I was trying to think of like unique names or whatever, and I always want to find like names that when you look it up, there's nothing else shows up except for that thing. That's pretty hard to do because there's so many like people make brands all that. So I knew it had to be kind of like a weird name. And one of my friends suggested like Luft, so it's like like an airy feeling, like a Luft. And then kind of like I put in my notebook and stuff. And then one of my friends back in Toronto here, he mentioned, he was like, oh, love work, that's kind of a cool name. Kind of sounds like love work, right? Like, loving what you do. So I always that kind of like touched me. I was like, oh, that's really cool. You know what? Like maybe I can use that as like a name, even though it's really weird. But I think it's like, it's funny because technically the Vora was designed in Sweden. And like some of the yo-yos I have are like designed all over the world because I'm sitting in a hostel. So when Yo-Yo Expert says like that designed in Canada, sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes it could be designed anywhere. Yeah. But that's where the name came from.
So let's talk about your process for designing titanium. You and I and Ernest just worked on a project called the Executive. Is there a name for it? Is it Titanium Executive?
Executive. Yeah, I guess the Titanium Executive. Yeah.
Yeah. Every now and then I write it like executive.
I know, I love that. That's really cool. It's a very doc pop thing. I don't really have a big difference between like titanium or aluminum. I'm obviously like way more experienced with titanium, and I think other people may be more experienced with like aluminum because that's what they've designed. But like I think my entire design process is it's very different between if it's my own design or if it's like a client's design. So like I said earlier, if it's a client's design, it's a very collaborative effort. So I ask for their opinions or, their like what they want, or even I tell them to send me yo-yos that they like, or like send me photos of yo-yos that they think are cool looking, stuff like that. So it's very collaborative versus like when it's just my own designs, I can, go for it for like whatever I want to do, I can just do it. So, I think a lot of my designs I start off with like, it's funny because like nowadays for most of Luftverk stuff, I don't pay attention to other yo-yos that much. Like I'm not one of those people that look on forums all day and it's like always looking at the new yo-yos. Like I actually don't know what's being put out. And especially now there's so many like new yo-yo companies or like, like the kind of like more homebrew stuff, which is awesome. Like I love seeing that. But it's just too much to keep up with. So I really don't look at other yo-yos as far as like inspiration goes, like maybe sometimes, but I actually look at like random stuff. Like sometimes like I'll be walking in like a grocery store and like there's like a chip bag that's packaged. Like the packaging looks cool. It says like it's like organic and how it's like super minimalist packaging and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like I'll find inspiration from stuff like that. I'll find inspiration from like if you've noticed like the branding for Luftverk is very like technical. Like there's a lot of like cross sections and like CAD drawings that are exploded and stuff like that. And I think that's a lot from like cars, like working on cars. Like I have to look through a factory service manual to figure out this one part, and it's a blown up part of like a million other parts, and it's almost like second nature because I look at that stuff all the time. but I just love the aesthetics of that. Like, I think that's really cool. It's a very like technical thing, and that's also carried from when I used to mod yo-yos. Like I would, I just love that. It was just, I think I'm just like a very technical person, I guess. I don't know. So that's like, I find my inspiration as far as like the aesthetics of something goes. And like me personally, I think, and I think a lot of people might have mixed opinions about this, but I think the aesthetics of a yo-yo is just as important as how it plays. Like, if not maybe slightly more, because like what is my goal as a designer? It's to design something that someone wants to play with, right? And if it kind of doesn't look like something they want to play with, or like aesthetically, maybe they might be put off by it, but it like plays amazing, then they might not play with it as much, right? Like they might not pick it up as much, like, or and the other thing too is that like because yo-yoing is not, it's so small and niche still, it's very much online, right? Like when you buy a yo-yo, you don't go to a yo-yo store unless you live in Northampton and just walk in the yo-yo expert. But like you can't just go to a yo-yo store and like talk to someone, and you look online and you buy a yo-yo and you just hope that it plays good. You can look at the specs, you can guess how it's going to play, but you never know until you first throw it, right? So like what are people basing their purchases off of, which is essentially like the name of it, the aesthetics of it, and like maybe the specs, like that's kind of important. So yeah, like it's important to me because it's like if I'm building yo-yos and designing them and I want people to use them and enjoy them, like the first step that they have to do is to actually buy them, right? Mm-hmm. Like if I take like maybe if I took like the ugliest photos and had a bad branding for the yo-yo, but the yo-yo stayed the same, like maybe less people would have access to this, and they might not be able to enjoy it even though they were looking to, right? Like there's a very like don't judge a book by its cover kind of thing. Like it's kind of hard to do when that's all you're basing your purchase off of, right? So I do first, as far as the design process, going back to that, why this is important is that like the yo-yo, like I look at it and I look at things that inspired me, like I said, like car parts or whatever, and I kind of draw an aesthetic for it, either kind of the profile of it or the hub of it, and I usually kind of like try to keep it a certain aesthetic, and obviously there are constraints with that, like the type of yo-yo I'm trying to design. If it's like a slim line, if it's super competition oriented, if it's super like laid back, like casual kind of playing. So it's like there's a lot of constraints to that, right? So that's like I'll start off with kind of the aesthetics of it, and then I'll kind of start tweaking it based on my personal experience on like making an educated guess on how I want it to feel. So then I'll start taking weight from the middle, like if it's too heavy or maybe, if it was too light or something, I would add material, right? So I would then kind of tweak it. And because I, focus on aesthetics first, it kind of forces, me to kind of have this constraint of what I can use, I guess. And it's kind of like a fun challenge to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are examples where I didn't follow a constraint, but that I have done before. But then I'll kind of tweak it, get a prototype. And that's kind of my design process, I think. Yeah. Sometimes it's weird, but yeah.
So for the executive, it was probably a lot easier because there was kind of an existing yo-yo. I know that basically we got the prototype and we had just some small feedback, and I think we're going to, there's one more prototype on the way.
Because titanium is so expensive, it's actually really expensive to do prototypes. With aluminum, you can do like 2 or 3 of them, but right now I think we're good to go for production because it was such a small change. It was, it was like a little bit lighter and like taking off weight in the middle. So those things are usually pretty safe. It's not like changing the profile, or we're not battling like this weird vibration issue. So, but for a normal yo-yo of yours, if you have kind of like a normal, how many prototype iterations do you go through before you hit publish? Oh, it depends. Sometimes I'll do prototypes and they don't even make the production. So, it really depends. Like, I would say it really depends on if it's similar to the executive, where I already have an existing design. Like you had the aluminum version, so we kind of know what it feels like, like if it works well, if it's machinable. That's another thing people might not consider, is if a tool will fit in there to be able to cut it. Yeah, so in that same like relating to that, if it's a yo-yo that is very similar, for example, I did like a Fulvia and the Ultima, which are two different like titanium yo-yos, are very competitive style yo-yos. But the Ultima, the only big difference is that it's like a U-shaped versus like a full. It's like the Fulvia is like this, and the Ultima is like this. That's literally the only change I did. So with that, there's still like one prototype, and it's like good to go, right? But I would say on average, I'm consistently fine with just one prototype. Like I'm pretty good at like getting it kind of like right on the first try kind of thing. Yeah. Again, that a lot of that has to do with how much I used to cut up yo-yos on lathes. Because I would put weight on a certain area and test it, and I would do it again and again. And as a kid, I was just so obsessed with that, and now it translates very well into like a skill, like a intrinsic skill. Like when I look at a cross section, I can kind of already tell how it's going to play and feel, issues it's going to have. It's going to have kickback, if it's going to have like a weird stability issues or whatever. So
for me, when I'm designing a yo-yo, and oftentimes I work with designers, and sometimes I try designing it myself, but the iteration process really comes down to my patience. You know, the cost on aluminum prototypes isn't too bad, and you know that's not the big thing. But for me, it's like, oh, like maybe I could just say we'll make this change and we'll just go into production with that change, and I won't test it or whatever. And it's not like a cost thing. It's just like I'm super impatient, and it could take, I mean, especially with COVID right now and things just happening, it could take 4 months to get your prototype, you know, from an iteration. It used to take about 2 months. For a little while, it was like a month and a half, you know, like you're in a queue, and then there's the shipping and all that. But yeah, now, for instance, I just got this boy. This is a bolt prototype. Bolt
no
part 1.
Way.
Yeah,
no
way.
Way.
Yeah.
I have never seen that.
This just came in the mail yesterday. And
that's Gellerin?
Yeah, Palm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I want that. And it has caps.
Yeah, it has caps, dude. Old school. It's close. Like I definitely wanted to kind of change things. Here's
mine.
Yeah.
I have mine here, so just wanted to.
Dude, that color, I can't get that freaking color in this plastic. But old and new. And then the only inside, so it's basically kind of designed more like, this is the modded bolt. So the modded bolt, we would, you know, shave them with sandpaper, and we'd stick some shims in, and we'd like silicone them. So this is kind of like a modded bolt. And my favorite mods that like Nick Correa and folks did had the schmoove grooves in them. So like I tried to kind of do schmoove groove. But I mean, so this is functionally very similar to that. Yeah. And the thing I wasn't trying to go into a sales pitch. I was just like, for me,
I want that yo-yo. Save me one. Buy one off you.
I have a company that's like, we need 60 of these, and we're good on the price, but they want them like mid-October. And then I have some other folks, like it's slightly too heavy. It's 65 grams, and I think I want it closer to 62, which is, I mean, kind of exactly what this is. But the thing is, like, do I like, this is going to be a big run for me, because I really want to kind of get a better deal, right, by placing a bigger order. I just don't want to wait 2 to 4 more months, you know, to get the thing. So I'm like, how confident do I feel, you know, removing 3 grams from this, that's all it takes. And I was just going to say, for you, it's like it's kind of a different thing. It's like, do I really want to spend X amount? And I don't know how much you spend for a prototype, but I'll use some examples. I did a prototype titanium weekender that I tried. And this is the first prototype that I was ever like, nope, never doing that. Like, this is not working. I'm just going to cancel this. This project is a failure, and it didn't work out. And 4 of these, which usually you do like 2 for titanium with my factory. But I was like, oh, I want 4 because I know some of my Patreon backers will want some. This was like $1,200,
Yeah.
just for a
Yeah.
failure, just $1,200, and you're just like, you get
Yeah.
it, and it's like that. You could just look at it. I opened the box and I'm like, that's the wrong size bearing. Like they used a D instead of an A, and just like I was like, just cut my strings about $1,200, and I'm never. Worst case, I would be out $400 for an aluminum if you just. And now I'm thinking about doing a second prototype again. A couple years have passed, and I'm like, okay, so let's look at this again. And it's like, if you just want one, it's like $600 for that thing, and that's just for like changes to this. So yeah, I imagine in your mind there's got to be something where it's like maybe you want to test something, but it's not really worth that. And I'm glad that you feel confident enough that you can just be like, oh, I know when to skip it and just go to production, because I'm terrified to just go to production on some of these.
It's funny because there's a lot of people that message me with like those prices, and like friends have made aluminum Yoyos before, and they want to make a titanium one. They're like, hey Jeff, is this the price that you pay? Like they think that it's like they're getting ripped off or something.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, that's how expensive it is. It's terrifying. I've spent like $2,000 on projects that just completely flop.
Oh,
so
yeah. I was wondering if you'd had anything like that, because I felt like a real big failure after this.
The Yoyo that I showed you, oh man, I don't even have it here with me. It had like the 3D printed parts and stuff. I still have it, and that was a complete failure. But that was really, really expensive. Like, so I first that one, like it's funny because I did. Oh man, like I have a bunch of like pretty interesting Yoyos, but they're not with me right now. They all have 3D printed parts, essentially. Like I was trying to do something that was like, it was closer to this.
They're hybrid. They're titanium
like
and
I designed.
Yeah.
So, and it's just like, I just love doing crazy stuff that only 3D printing can do. You can't manufacture that any other way. So it was like a titanium Yoyo with like a 3D printed thing on it. And it's like, every time I tried it, it was horrible, and vibrations, parts would fly apart. It was just terrible, and it was very expensive. So there was one, I made like an organic one later on where the part was inside the cup, so it was less susceptible to like the finger like damaging the part or whatever. And that one was actually the most like I think I can make that, but still very scared. Yeah. So I kind of just let it sit there, and like I think I did one of the more risky projects was that I did a slimline that you could like flip the cap over.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful.
And I wanted it to look like it was something that was like a 1960s engineer would have on a desk or something, right? So that was kind of one of the more risky projects. I think that was, but it was still okay because everything was machined. But yeah, it's very expensive, and I'm very lucky that I've actually never, like what you're talking about, I've never been like frustrated or scared, and I can totally understand why like someone would be, but maybe it's like I do think that it's just like specifically titanium experience, because that's what I just jumped head first into, and yeah, I think it's just, if I do it, like I feel like, for example, when you or anyone that has a lot more experience with aluminum, they probably don't have that same like fear, I guess, and then because they've done it so many times, like if they're used to what aluminum feels like and how to kind of make the changes, right? And then the other side of it is maybe I've never had a chance to work with aluminum, so I don't know any better. So I'm just like, $800 for prototypes, no problem, because I don't know any better. I guess
it's funny to think you haven't worked with aluminum for like one of your releases.
With one, I think like one I did, but it still like had titanium parts on it. It was like an Amphora with it was a 7075 aluminum hub with like titanium rings. So it was still kind of expensive to do. But yeah, it's now that when I think I was talking to Brandon the other day, so I've been working with Brandon a little bit, and when when we're talking about like manufacturing prices, I was like, whoa, why is that so cheap?
Yeah.
It's great,
Yeah.
like but that's amazing because you can like just test out so many designs and stuff, right? So, but yeah, it's I think I'm very lucky that I'm just used to it. It's just not fun.
So let's talk about like as a designer and I would say owner of one of the most I don't know ritzy brands, right? Like the Gucci of yo-yos, right? No,
Yes.
probably not. Yeah, okay, you like the Gucci of yo-yos.
Yeah,
So
I'd say, I guess it became that way.
yeah. So what are your biggest pet peeves in other designs? I know you say you don't look at many yo-yos, but there's got to be some stuff that you see and you're just like, oh, that drives me nuts.
Not very much.
No, okay.
No. You mean like you're talking about like other designs that I just see in the world?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Like some people hate finger spin bowls. Dave from One Drop just doesn't. I mean, he'll make them if you want.
I don't like know his reason for it,
Yeah,
but I would actually agree with him from a performance standpoint because if you look at the point of a nipple is to have the axle there,
yeah,
and you try to like any weight in the middle is dead weight. Like you don't want weight in the middle. Like it's literally useless. It just makes the yoke feel heavy, but it doesn't add anything to performance at all in any shape or form.
yeah,
But if you look at a nipple, it encapsulates the axle, and then if you take away the weight, well, now you just inverted that, and you're adding the thickness of that axle plus more because of the bowl. So I would agree with him. Finger spinning things are terrible. But I don't know
okay.
if that's like his reasoning, but that's my reasoning on why. But like because plastic is so light, it works with a skyva. With
Yeah,
aluminum, it's not that great to be honest. But no, it's with going back to your question. I really can't think of anything that's a pet peeve because um, it's I can say like, oh, there are things that I don't like. I wouldn't like on my yo-yos. Like I don't do much like splash and dive stuff like that. I
yeah.
just don't like it. I just don't really like it like personally.
Hmm.
Like even if my yo-yo, if you look at like my yo-yo collections in the past, like I usually bought like solid colors. I didn't even do like the split color stuff. So that's just a reflection of my personality. So when I look at other people's designs, even if I don't like it, like um, it's obviously like a representation of like their personality and they're allowed to be different. And like there's obviously tons of people that love that stuff. So there's no real like pet peeves. I think everyone has their own like creative like vision of what like a yo-yo can be and can't be, I guess. But to me, I think everything's fair game. Like I love seeing the super weird stuff just as much as I like seeing the super performance stuff, and because when I do look at that stuff, it might spark something in my head, being like, wow, you know what? I want to try to do a design for Luftverk that might be inspired by something that I might not even like. Maybe it has
Hmm.
has a certain step or groove in it that I like something. So yeah, no real pet peeves. I love seeing them all.
I just want to mention that what I consider my signature design is the Icarus yo-yo, which has the gaudy splash and bright colors and a finger spin area. So I need to send you one of those and see if I can change your mind.
What when you said like okay, figure fit area is like it's like I did do it on the Skyva for a reason, right? Because
Yeah.
it works well, right? It has a purpose, but it also has its downsides, and I was trying to kind of um, empathize with Sean because I know
Yeah.
he's a great designer, and like the stuff he puts out is like A plus. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I trust him, and I love that he tells me his feedback, and then is willing to kind of work with me. Oh, here's an Icarus. So gaudy splash
yeah,
and finger spin area, and this little finger spin area, this kind of slight raise that kind of is like a triangular point or something that goes around. That's kind of been my signature. I'm doing it on Pop Arts, and we're actually redoing a weekender. The next round of weekenders, or at least the prototypes that I'm ordering, will have finger spin cups, which I know seems weird for a responsive yo-yo, but it turns out they're perfect for pull starts.
yeah,
All that being said, this thing is all about lightness and it's about the feel, which I think that nipple weight on something that's only 47 grams, that nipple weight is probably pretty it probably makes a big difference. And by changing it to put a finger spin area in, we're adding 4 grams, which sucks.
Yep.
So that's why I'm ordering prototypes before I hit publish on that one, because like, I definitely need to try that. But yeah, who knows, when you take that pole, when you take that out and you replace it with some kind of like ring weights that are in the middle of the middle, who knows what that's going to be like. So that's pretty scary. That's fun though.
Yeah, it's always fun to like try new things and stuff. That's what I mean. Like everyone has their own kind of like personality and stuff. Yeah, love that.
So I want to know what your holy grail yo-yo is. Not even in your collection, just the best yo-yo, the yo-yo that you covet the most.
Like without like, I would say, okay, holy grail. That's a really, really interesting question. The first thing that comes to mind is the end. I was obsessed with the end. I still don't have the one from Elvin. I did buy it, but he didn't have enough for the first run. I was like, I need that yo-yo right now. But he's gonna, I think he's gonna do like another run, and I'll get one from that one. I'm not talking about that one that Elvin did, but the OG one.
Yeah,
I remember when that came out. I think there's a few tangents of why that yo-yo was just so like holy grail to me. I think Feral Parrot. What's his real name? I just know him as Feral Parrot.
Nick Correa.
Nick, you're right, exactly. So Nick, he did the Shmoo rings and stuff, but because we were all on the forums, he was another guy that would post up mods and stuff on the mini lathe, and I was into that, and I think he was active on the Yo as well. And every time he'd post something, it would be really cool, and I'd be like, wow, this is like super fascinating. I would take inspiration from that and machine my own stuff. And when I found out that he was doing something with you, and it was based on like a Babezilla or Eats It, I was just like, that's crazy, because the Babe, I owned a Babe and Eats It back in the day, and my good friend Adam, he owned like 3 Babes and like 2 Eats It. Like we were obsessed with like NTOs. Wow. They were so cool, and both of our holy grail was like the end. It was like, whoa, like that's crazy. And the funny thing is I remember being like a teenager and watching those sell out on your website, because I didn't have $150 at the time. Yeah. But that, even like, I think like 5 years ago, when I went to One Drop Shop, that was my first time I ever saw a Babe, and I took like a million photos of it, or not Babe, an end. Yeah. And I took like a million photos of it, and I couldn't like stop playing with it, and just like that. I was like, wow, this is in my hands. Like, I don't know why that specific yo-yo. It's just super trippy. It's like, definitely holy grail. I don't know why, but it just is. And it's now I'm doing a podcast with you here. So
we I haven't published it yet as we're recording, but I just did kind of an oral history with Phil Cox and Nick Correa, who did the end with me, and it's kind of fun going down that path and seeing how many of our memories didn't quite line up, and the things we did kind of. But one of the things that really kind of stuck out to me, I totally forgot. Even at $150, we weren't making any money on those because we were buying basically full price Eats Its and then hiring someone to modify them. And they weren't even painted or anode, right? They were raw, but like, yeah, I mean, we're basically like, they gave us a little bit of a deal, but it was, so, and then, we got them anodized, and the guy fucked up. So then we had to get them stripped, and we got them anodized again, which is what gave them the amazing finish.
That was another thing. That's what made it so holy grail, is like the authenticity of it. It was like, wow, we messed up, but the finish is so cool. And it's like, you probably couldn't reproduce that even if you wanted to. We're going to do like anodized yo-yos and then cover them and like try to strip them and then fail at that. And then like, it's just so cool. Like the story behind it. I remember that. That was super cool. So sorry, I interrupted.
I told Elvin, like, we got to find some way to get this finished. Would you be willing to do this? And he's like, no. And especially because they ate strings. That finish was super smooth to the hand, but it would just saw through string. So I did kind of half-heartedly be like, hey, we should like anodize these and then acid bath them and, you know, do them again. And then the first batch, there was an issue with anodizing. His anodizer messed up, and I was like, dude, this is the sign. Like you need to take those.
You need to do it.
Like, yeah, we're not doing that, Doc. Like, he's been super cool. He's like, if I had anything that was like hardcore, he would be like, okay, we'll do that. But this is just that one thing. I'm just like, hey, we could strip them. Haha, just kidding. Unless you want to strip them.
That sounds like me when I was working with Caribou Lodge on the Peak.
Yeah.
And so they were willing to do anything, like the Titanium Peak. They're willing to do everything for it. But I was like, can we get Levy to paint like 10 of them or 20 of them or something? And then he'd be like, no, like, so yeah. I know your frustrations.
Well, yeah. So I think that's all the questions I had for you. You know, we're working on the executive, so probably around the time this video drops, the executive will be out on your shop on Luftverk. And are there going to be different colors on those? Are they going to be just one color?
I think we're going to start off with the raw titanium ones, and like kind of go from there and see how they're perceived and stuff. So I for whatever reason, raw titanium always sells the quickest for me. Like the customers that the most. So. But yeah, it would be interesting to do, run down the line, maybe a limited run, maybe like one for your store or Yoyo Expert or something like that. That could be anodized. That'd be cool. So, yeah.
Well, that's cool. And then maybe we'll see what happens with the Titanium Weekender.
Yeah.
I'll either.
If you need any tips or anything, titanium is frustrating sometimes, to say the least. Yeah. But,
well, for the Titanium Weekender, one of the issues is. I want it to be light and responsive, and we can change that gap, right? But to keep it close to the same dimensions, it's just a heavier material. So the Weekender itself is pretty thin. Yeah. And, the titanium is even thinner, but it's like, you don't want to go much thinner. So it's like, where do I want to take off that, that weight or whatever? And so those are the things kind of going through my mind with that. I was going to give a shout out to Steve, our Bobby, who hooked me up with this Daytona titanium. This is my first Luftverk yo-yo, slimline responsive yo-yo. This is cool. So I don't have a lot of titaniums in my collection. I think it's this one. Oh, I did want to ask you about this. Do you walk the dog with your titanium yo-yos?
That is a great question. I don't personally walk the dog with titanium yo-yos. I have one like Evora ProtoTipe. Actually, it was like the RSP ProtoTipe, and it's like the only Evora RSP. Like, it was made from this weird aluminum that was like super hard, and they did like this crazy finish on it. And like at the time, because I was selling them, I was just like, oh, this one's gonna be on Beauty Gear, and I would like try it, and it would. Because it was like a harder titanium, it would spark like crazy. It would be like white and big sparks would come out. And now I'm like kicking myself because that's the only RSP one, and like they've all gone up in price. And it's like I'm gonna buy one back that's like more. It's like it just doesn't make sense. But I don't walk the dog with my titanium layers. I like to keep them pretty. I'm one of those people.
Well, right on. Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey, for your time. I really appreciate it. If people want to follow you on Instagram, it's at Luftverk Yoyos.
Yeah, just at Luftverk. Yeah,
at Luftverk,
because it's such a weird name, so can't miss it.
and you got the .com as well.
Yep, and .com. You can email me, you can DM me, you can Facebook message me, whatever you want. Usually, you'll find me somehow. So. Cool.
Well, keep your eye out for those titanium executives from Ernest Kahn and Luftverk and Doc Pop. And thanks so much for working on that project with me. And thanks for doing this interview. It's been really good catching up with you, dude.
You're very welcome. It's really fun to like reflect on my past because I don't do it often. It's pretty cool to like relive that.
Cool.
So a lot of fun. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Cheers.
central to my residential. Evident while I try to weather my temperamental. Existential, my brain credit is transcendent. It seems to be eternal, a pandemic that can't end.